Good morning, everyone. Sad that I can't be with you today, but kind of excited that because of technology, I can be with you on your screen. I miss seeing your faces so much, and just being in each other's presence is so important, and I think a big factor of what we've been missing so much in the last year or so. So I would like to start today with a question. If you got a pencil and paper, you can scribble it down. I'm going to ask it to you again at the end. But if you, in conversation with God, and He said you could have anything that you wanted, what would you ask for and why? Interesting that I think maybe someone my age versus a young adult versus a teenager and even a young child, each one of us would ask for something totally different. And yet would probably want to use the best choice and wisdom and discernment that we could pull together, maybe even consult with other people. What should I wish for? So I want you to think about that. Today's scripture is all about Solomon, and I even learned some things about Solomon that I didn't know. But first, I'd like to share with you a story about a lady that I think used discernment and wisdom to the best of her ability. And the name of the story is Socks and Shoes. A little boy about 10 years old was standing in front of a shoe store, peering into the window and shivering cold. A lady approached and says, "Hey, little guy, what's going on? What are you looking for?" "I was asking God to give me a pair of shoes," he said. So the lady took him by the hand, went into the store, and asked the clerk to get a half a dozen pair of socks and bring them to the back of the store. So the little boy and her walked to the back, and then she also asked for a basin of water and a towel. So as he brought the socks and the water and the towel, she knelt down, washed his feet, dried them off, put on a pair of socks, and they went and tried on and bought a new pair of shoes. "No doubt," the lady said, "I'll bet your feet feel better now." And so as she turned to go, the astonished lady was caught by the hand, and he was looking up at her with tears in his eyes and asked, "Are you God's wife?" From the mouths of babes sometimes, when we try to make good choices. So, a little bit about Solomon. I grew up in Sunday school class, like probably many of you, and I heard the stories about the goodness of King Solomon, how wise he was, and the two ladies that came to him for a honest judgment of, they each claimed a child belonged to both of them. And so King Solomon, in his great wisdom, said, well, if you both claim this child is yours, then let's cut him in half and each of you can have him, have a piece. But the mom, who's actually was the mom of the baby, said, no, don't do that. She can have him. Because of her great love, she didn't want to lose her child, and so that let King Solomon know who the actual mother was. And so justice was played out that day. But King Solomon didn't always make really good choices and decisions. There were murders. There were actually, the reason Solomon was actually the third son of David and Bathsheba. No, excuse me, second son. And his older brothers, David's third son, Absalom, killed David's firstborn, Ammon, in revenge for the rape of his sister Tamar. Absalom, in turn, was killed in battle during his revolt against David. So in 1 Kings chapter 1, we receive a brief history of struggle for power and Bathsheba's advocacy for Solomon, which led to David naming him the successor to the throne. So we see two pictures of Solomon. One perspective recounts how Solomon abused his power. He enslaved people, amassed a great amount of wealth for himself. He used commoners to build temples and palaces, taxed the people unmercifully, married non-Jewish women, which was a big no-no back there, and worshipped their gods. And the unity of the nation, which had suffered under David because of Absalom's revolt, continued to crumble under Solomon. I'm going to read the scripture to you, and this is the scripture. I took it out of the Message. I understood it better. So hopefully it will help you too. So it's from 1 Kings, 2nd chapter, 10 through 12. When David joined his ancestors, he was buried in the city of David. David ruled Israel for 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, and another 33 years in Jerusalem. Solomon took over as the throne of his father David, and he had a firm grip on the kingdom. Solomon arranged a marriage contract with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he married Pharaoh's daughter and brought her to the city of David, until he had completed building his royal palace and God's temple and the wall around Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the people were worshiping at local shrines because at that time no temple had been built in the name of God, and so Solomon loved God and continued to live in the God-honoring ways of David his father, except that he also worshiped at the local shrines, offering sacrifices and burning incense. The king went to Gibeon, the most popular and prestigious of the local shrines to worship, and he sacrificed 1,000 whole burnt offerings on that altar. And that night there in Gibeon, God appeared to Solomon in a dream and said, "What can I give you? Ask." Solomon says, "You were extremely generous in love with David, my father, and he lived faithfully in your presence. His relationships were just and his heart right, and you have persisted in this great and generous love by giving him, and this very day, a son to sit on the throne. And now here I am, God, my God. You have made me your servant ruler of the kingdom in the palace of David, my father. I'm too young for this, a mere child. I don't know the ropes and hardly know the ins and the outs of this job, and here I am, set down in the middle of the people you've chosen, a great people, far too many to ever count. Here's what I want. Give me a God-listening heart so I can lead your people well, discerning the differences between good and evil. For who on their own is capable of leading your glorious people?" God the Master was delighted with Solomon's response, and God said to him, "Because you have asked for this and haven't grasped for a long life or riches or the doom of your enemies, but you have asked for the ability to lead and govern well, I give you glory. I give you those things that you didn't ask for. There's not a king anywhere who could come up to your mark. And if you stay on course, keeping your eye on the life map and the God signs as your father did, I'll also give you a long life. So here he got what he actually didn't ask for, kind of as like extra bonus, for saying that he really wanted to learn how to listen and how to govern his people with a listening heart. So I want to go back and talk a little bit more about that a listening heart, an understanding mind, the ability to discern what is right and good, these are quality essentials to good governing, examples that we should pray to find in our own leaders today. It speaks well of the young king that he recognizes the enormous responsibility he has and seeks not material gifts for himself, but gifts of character that will benefit his people. Wisdom in the biblical tradition has to do in large part with what Solomon requests, the ability to discern good and evil, the ability to listen well, and to judge rightly. In this story, Solomon's great wisdom is understood as a special gift from God. And in biblical literature, wisdom is also understood as a gift of God. It's given, however, not just to kings, but to all who faithfully seek it. That means me and you. In Proverbs, it says, "Tune your ears to the world of wisdom and set your heart on a life of understanding, searching for it like a prospector panning for gold, like an adventurer on a treasure hunt." God gives out wisdom free, is plain spoken in knowledge and understanding. As in this story, wisdom was reward those who acquire it, but it is not to be sought simply for personal gain. And it's tied to one's life in community and to one's life with God. You know, in the story of Job, after he lost everything, friends, property, family, livestock, and endured all kinds of pestilence and plagues, he stayed steadfast. And at the end of Job, these things were all restored to him and more. And I'm sure he used all those things for good. Sometimes our experiences and our knowledge helps us in our discerning process, and it helps us to think of others. So, I'm going to ask the question again. If you could have anything that your heart desires, this isn't a prayer to God, so you're actually in conversation with God. It's not like you're rubbing the bottle in the genie or the magic lantern. It is in a prayer to God, and he says, you can have anything that you want. What would you choose and why? May God be with you in your ponderings and your wonderings as you continue to draw near to our Creator, who loves us more than my poor little mind can wrap around. But as long as we stay seeking and knocking and asking, he will answer. Blessings to each one of you with great love. Bye.